Hello, risers and climbers. We hope you are having a very good day. Woo! Welcome back. Woo! Welcome back to the Rise Today Inspirational Podcast, my friends. We are just having a dance party here to start things off. I am so honored to share that our show is now brought to you with great thanks to the amazing sponsor, Popped Collar Productions. You will have to check out Popped Collar Productions if you have a story to share. If you are wanting to create your own podcast, be sure to reach out. We hope you've loved our last show featuring Lexi Taylor at Instagram, who opened up the conversation about gender dysphoria and who shared all about her powerful transformation from this like full-on alpha male to now shining forth her female energy and her feminine energy. On the show, she gave us all tools to increase our confidence and our courage to shine forth in our most authentic way and to live in a way that's congruent with our truest, most congruent selves. And here on the show, our mission is always to bring forth these stories of raw and open hardship and to make you on your journeys of hardship feel not so alone and to share tools of empowerment to help you rise and cope better with stresses and to bounce back and to really thrive through the face of adversity. I always admire and celebrate the strength and courage of our guests here on the show who share their stories openly. And today we are just so incredibly honored to get to feature the inspirational public figure, Sam Led. Sam has faced ongoing struggles with ADHD and anxiety, but through powerful mindset tools and powerful mindset shifts, he now thrives. He serves as a transformational coach based out of beautiful Santa Barbara, California, to empower others with these same mindset tools that have empowered his very own success. He serves as a guide to help his clients overcome fear and thoughts of insecurities, which we all face. His book, Fearless, will be released soon. Sam, welcome. You exemplify our mission here at the Rise Today Inspirational Podcast, and we are so happy to have you with us.
I haven't had an introduction like that before, and I'm just so honored, and I'm so honored to be on your podcast. And I love your show, and I love that you have gone through a tremendously, I would say, very human journey, but something that a lot of us, unfortunately, have not experienced. And you coming out the other side, strong as ever, ready to tackle anything is just wonderful. And
that means a lot, Sam, from the bottom of my heart. And that's exactly why I'm here today, right? Because even though I was always enveloped with so many forces of love and support, literally from all corners of this world on my crazy journey just to get to be here with you today, I still felt so alone, right? Yeah. Unless really connecting with people who truly understood how hard it was. Even though I'd have 60 people come to see me every day in my hospital room, 60 friends and family, wow. I was never alone, but I still felt alone unless I was connecting with those who truly understood the depth of how hard certain days can be. Yeah. And so I'm here just really to help others not feel that sense of solitude and isolation, and to really connect and serve that platform where people can connect and to really share these individual stories that all have so many tools within them, resilience tools, right, that are so powerful to help us all overcome our own individual struggles. And no matter what we all face at the end of the day, and I know this is a message you preach too, no matter what we all face at the end of the day, pain is pain and hurt is hurt and grief is grief. And these same tools, if it's ADHD and anxiety or whatever we're facing, cancer, right, these same tools can apply as a common thread throughout to help empower and inspire and support everyone who are facing hard days. So
I love that because it's so true, Erica. What kind of came up for me is in when you were on this journey of healing after all these health issues rose up for you, and how you kind of you overcame it, is that you saw your inner resilience. You saw who you are, and we all see who we are every single day. We're just not paying attention. We all drop into the present moment. We all see our kind of our bright pilot light, but we're too kind of distracted by the drama, the soap opera going on in our head that's 100% not real. And it's interesting that you mentioned kind of, your job as a coach and I would call you kind of like a conduit, reminding people who they are, because we all forget. We remember and we forget because we get caught up in
No, I definitely agree. And this is why I'm so excited for the show. I think we're so similarly aligned, although we're really just connecting you and I think we're so similarly aligned in our mission and the message that we propel, although we share it perhaps in a slightly different way. And I always talk about my story in terms of these profound awakenings that I experienced because of the stillness, right? I feel like I almost needed to be knocked on the head and confined to this hospital room, literally like held in shackles to my ICU bed, right? To slow down long enough to hear these lessons from so many truths, as you talk about it, right? That perhaps I had buried along the way and didn't want to face those hard emotions, right? And I kind of carried forth and I was like, yeah, I'm fine. But we've all experienced hard days and, not even trauma per se, but it's, when we bury that, then we kind of internalize that as trauma, and it's kind of not, we don't shine in our most congruent of manner. And then that's where we can get that disconnect from. And so sometimes it takes us these big adversities, right? And finding the meaning in these adversities that do come our way, causing, from this crazy chiropractor, go, right? And then faced in the hospital of just this complete four white walls around me, right? And the stillness there to really hear these awakenings. I've always said that every time I've fallen down, because I've experienced a lot of this rise and fall that's been really difficult, but every time we fall down,
hence risetoday.com.
Yes, I always say that I still had more lessons to learn, and so it was really, really hard because I would rise up after surviving this 2-month terminal cancer prognosis and then be knocked back down, but then I'd fall down again and be spinning in my head like all these tools that just worked for this aren't helping me now. And it was so hard, but I always realized I still had more lessons to learn. And this is what I love about the message that you propel. And I want to hear all about this. So can you take us back? You were talking a lot. I've read a lot about your story and how you felt like you were misdiagnosed for a long time.
A long time. Sure.
Yes,
and just before and before I go into that real quick, and what I share with my clients is that we do have this essential nature, which is calm, well-being, and love within all of us. And that's not some, Instagram post. That's truth. That's a truth that we've all known about and we all experience every day in a walk, because we all are in a walking meditation. We just don't pay attention to that. And once we slow down to the speed of life, as you did when you were slowing down to the speed of life in your hospital bed, you kind of got to peek at it, right? So going to my story, which is very much for me growing up, I came from a good family, parents both in the mental health field, growing up, for better or for worse. I didn't realize I was in psychoanalysis for 35 plus years. No, I'm kidding. My father being in the mental health field. And so when I was diagnosed with a learning disability, I was like 7 years old, it didn't seem right to me. The label didn't seem, in fact, the label itself, even as a 7-year-old old soul as I was, and a kind of a restless old soul, made no sense. And I felt misunderstood as a young kid, twofold. And I would sit in class, 7 or 8 years old, and this is when the TRS-80, I don't know if you remember growing up, the first generation of Apple computers, there was like 3 computers in our classroom. And I would just get up and go to the computer, start exploring it, which, and didn't ask the teacher, and I would get yelled at. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it, right? Because I was caught up in the theater of my own thinking, which we all get caught up in all the time. And this would happen over and over again. And fast forward to high school, I was really good at writing and history, and I was in advanced placement classes, but the weaknesses were so weak, and the things I was good at was I was really good at it. It made no sense to me. Like how, if I have this learning disability, it was like a visual motor thing, which I still to this day don't know what the heck it means, 35 plus years later. So it was further confusion because, again, sitting in a classroom, even in high school, and I'm restless. I want to get up. I mean, it didn't feel natural to me. And getting up and talking out of turn and getting detentions and getting sent to the principal's office and then looking at the principal saying, Principal so-and-so, how does it make, challenging the principal, how does that make sense that we need to sit in a classroom for an hour and a plus and ask permission to get up and walk? Or I do my best work, principal, when I'm moving around. And he would be, the very, no offense to a puritanic kind of, environment. That's not the rule is you need to sit in class and raise your hand and ask for a bathroom pass. And I felt like what's missing here. And again, I'm editorializing that. But what I found out later and years later, that, and actually it was my late 20s that I was diagnosed, finally diagnosed with ADHD and an anxiety disorder, which actually also made no sense because I would go in and out like all of us do, right? I look at myself as ADHD is not who I am. It's a neurotype. It's just how my brain works and how all of us that have this blessing and a curse, because we're really good at some things. We're very empathic. We care about others. We can multitask. We can problem solve quickly. But, the deficits, the overstimulation, the anxiety, the distraction, the forgetfulness, missing cues in conversations was very difficult for me. But then I saw myself not having ADHD symptoms, not because I was on medication or anything, because I would naturally drop into the present moment, like we all do for no reason. Like I would get yelled at or I would say something funny, which I thought was funny and classmates thought was funny, but the teacher didn't think was funny. And I would get attention and I would give her a dirty look. I'm like, wait a second. They're laughing. Why can't I say that? Like, who am I? It's just thought. Long story short, when I saw that I was just having a different neurotype, that I wasn't attention deficit, I was just attention different.
I love that.
And yes, well, it's really kind of encapsulates a lot of folks with ADHD, which, ADHD is kind of like a Venn diagram. Again, I'm not a doctor and I don't want to be a doctor. I like the I like the work that you do and I love naturopaths. But when I saw in my late 20s that I'm not the sum total of my thinking. Like when I'm not in my ADHD thinking, when I'm just present, I'm powerful. I can do anything. Like everyone in the audience that knows someone that has ADHD or has an anxiety disorder, you're powerful. And that's not just some self-help stuff. It's the truth. But then we forget again and we go back up into our machine. And so fast forward a couple more years, about 10 years later, I'm in my 20s, in the working world. And for someone with ADHD in the working world, it can be complicated and burdensome sometimes, especially if you're working in a cubicle, which I didn't like doing. I liked moving around, and I was in sales and marketing. And then something happened to me about 18 years ago that was really traumatic, which is in my book that I share in my book. And I never thought I would survive it. Again, I felt misunderstood what was happening. I didn't really kind of put two and two together. And I would have kind of snippets. I would have like just little like teasers of calm, of quiet, like you did in the hospital bed, where I felt like Sam. I felt in the midst of all this turmoil going on in my life, and I had those moments of quiet that we all experience, that I just felt good for no reason. When everything around me was, like London Bridge is falling down, right? And then it didn't make sense to me how that's possible if I'm with all these diagnoses that the doctor said, I'm going to have to manage this. It's going to be with you for the rest of your life. You're going to have to take medication. And listen, I love God bless doctors. They're just doing their best. They want to help people for the most part, and therapists, and it's all innocent that they see things in a little bit of a different way than what I point to in the understanding. And that's okay too. I don't know everything, and neither does anybody. Whatever
Oh, and
works
I
for
think
you.
on that point, I think on that point, I think it's really important to say, and to clarify, because there are a lot of people that are upset with the medical profession, right? And there are a lot of people who just 100% support the medical profession, as I do. And I think that discrepancy really comes from, how do we see our medical doctors? And for me, I see our medical doctors as educators,
That's right.
And they have a role on our path, 100%, right? But if we want to talk about whose job it is to heal us, it's our job. It's not the doctor's job to heal us.
That's right.
Right. And I think that's where the global misconception really comes from, is that a lot of people passively, and it's innately, it's almost like ingrained in society that we do this, that we adopt this passive approach to our health, where we put our health and wellness in the hands of others, no matter who it is on our path. Right. But we really need to take that accountability back, like you're talking about, and put it on our own shoulders for that.
That's right.
And use those medical doctors, as amazingly educated as all of them are, trying to serve us in the best ways possible, as our educators, right? And also our guides in a different way from how you're serving as a guide. Yes. And
yes.
I think you've touched on a lot of things that I just want to just quickly jump on. I do have one quick question though. Your anxiety that you were diagnosed with in combination with the ADHD, was that social anxiety or generalized anxiety?
It was generalized, and yes, and the interesting thing about that is, again, when we're slapped with a diagnosis, we think that's the sum total of us, of who we are.
Yes,
a lot of us, and because our conditioning, part of the understanding that I share and where I point my clients back to, and mostly for me, because this understanding is basically saved my life and has made my life and my partner's life a more richer experience. Twofold. And it's not a technique, it's not a modality, it's a truth. It's how kind of mind works. It's how the system works. And so when getting, and I love what you said there, is it like there's a psychological innocence in all of us. Doctors, they took the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. And there's some amazing doctors out there, my father included. So there's some amazing practitioners there. There's some amazing therapists out there and coaches that are doing the good work. And not to poo-poo Western medicine, I always say explore for yourself. Don't listen to my words, right? Explore for yourself and get the answer. So, getting back to kind of, my journey with generalized anxiety and ADHD and dealing with all this, once I got kind of a real glimpse of how it really works, where we have this inner narrator talking to us all the time, that if we remove that narrator that's always exaggerating, because the brain wants to keep you safe, and the brain hasn't had a software update since the Paleolithic era, as far as I'm concerned, it's still back in caveman times. But then we throw conditioning at it, and smartphones and news and schedules and all this stuff, and finances and kids and everything into the mix. And the brain gets lost in the minutia because it still thinks that it's a stimulus response thing, 100%. It's thought, feel. And for me, when I saw like the game the brain was playing, it wasn't, we're all, and I do believe we're all awakened. We just don't pay attention to it enough. Like we all experience nirvana every single day, but it's not what we think it is. It's the calm. You're
so right.
In our inner guidance that we have that took me decades to really see, because I didn't trust my inner guidance, because I thought the inner guidance was in the form of anxious thoughts, right? The speedy thoughts, because I thought those thoughts were trying to protect me, and that was completely erroneous. I didn't trust myself. And when I started to really trust my intuition, which is we all have this wisdom within us, we just don't pay attention to it enough, because it isn't fireworks and soap opera and between our heads.
I think you talk a lot about this inner narrative, which I love. And I think for me, that's the noise that's happening all around, right? This when we can't tune into that truth, and we can't find that calm, because we're kind of stuck on that autopilot of life with these societal expectations for whatever they may be, right? But we get all wrapped up in this autopilot, and we can't hear our own truth, as you're referring to it, through all that noise. And for me to hear that truth, I needed those 4 white walls in my hospital room. For you've heard the truth in a different way. Mm-hmm. And that calm that truth, that calm that you can find, for me, that has been the absolute greatest gift of hardship, right? Is finding that calm in my heart and slowing down and really appreciating. You talk also about being more present, appreciating the power of now for what it is right here, right now. In my sense, taking off my focus off my destination of survival and putting it on how can I maximize the power of right here and right now. And I find, this state that you're talking about, it's almost like this state of enlightenment, right? That we can achieve once we find that calm and that truth through those hardships that we face. And it's so powerful once we get there.
I love that. Exactly what it's, I could take that a little bit farther, because
yes,
what you said is just brilliant. When it comes to that state, we call it flow state. We drop into that state all day long, every single day. And when we see that state, when we point to that state more, there's no abracadabra. Like, you don't have to you don't even have to meditate. Our thinking always settles. And when I saw that the content of my thinking, when I'm an ADHD overstimmed, like, because folks with ADHD, you know what it's like? It's kind of like having 20 YouTube channels on, which I do have on my computer all at once. We have stimuli comes at us all at once in Technicolor. It's like one of those old Technicolor movies with the colors, and it's wonderful if you're, a creative type, or you have to problem solve or do multitask, which some people say it's not possible, especially men. Women are a lot smarter than we are. So when I saw that the content of my thinking, especially when I was going through this terrible couple years, when I never thought I'd make it out alive, and that again,
tell me more about
stay tuned. Well, stay tuned for that in my book. But the content of our thinking, when it's revved up, when I'm in my ADHD thinking, when I'm overstimulated and cranky, in a low mood, when the machinery of my thinking is just in kind of like tilt mode, the check engine light's going on in my head, that's the time when the thinking is completely full of baloney. 100% of your thinking when you're in a low mood, and you can test this out for yourself, is complete baloney, and it's not to be believed. All the brain is doing is telling you that, Sam, Erica, you're a little too zoomed in right now. It's time to back off the gas. That's all it's doing. The content we think is scripture, but because we feel our thinking, we think it's real because it's uncomfortable. And then I learned,
how do we change
be anxious.
That? How do we change that when we get all caught up in those moments?
By not doing anything.
Our mind is racing. Yeah. How do we change that? How do we shift from that, Sam?
Right. And so for me, what I saw is when I'm ramped up and caught up in my head, like we all are a lot of the time, sometimes, especially in a pandemic world that we live in, one of the things is just to be sitting still with it, because our brain is perfect. It has its own self-leveling, self-correcting system. It's kind of like your computer. All the brain is a computer. Who you are underneath the noise is calm, is love, is well-being, is expansive. Okay? So you can just sit with it. You can sit, just because, you can still suffer in being uncomfortable. It's not going to kill you, right? Like, you can experience this full human experience and let the energy of this anxiety move through you, or overwhelm move through you, because within minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, it's going to settle and you're going to be off to new thinking. Because if you try to fix it, if you try to use techniques and modalities, which I don't believe work, and if those work for some people, wonderful. Again, don't listen to my words. Do what's good for you.
What would be tangible changes, though, let's say for parents to help their children who perhaps struggle with ADHD and anxiety in school? What would be a tangible change for those parents to help their children? What kind of tools could you give those parents to share with their children for an actual tangible change for what they can do in class when all of a sudden they just feel so overwhelmed?
Yeah.
And maybe they don't have the time to sit with it there. Is there something that can help switch their focus?
I love that question, because I wish I could tell my younger self what I'm about to share with the audience, is let your kids run around when they're home from school. Let them explore and be kids. Let them go outside. Let them get all this extra energy out. let them be themselves. There's nothing wrong with them. And I know parents, I know clinicians and people watching this be like, what do you mean there's nothing wrong with my kid? He's acting out, he's getting in trouble and blah, 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 blah. Okay.
I really resonate with that because
but there's nothing wrong with any of them. It's a neurotype. And when we see that, it's so powerful and it's so liberating. And just be okay with your kid getting in trouble. Like, obviously there's consequences for actions, right? You know, half our prison population has ADHD and unfortunately, and they've used this understanding and taken it into the prison system. And prisoners, after they've understood how the mind works and how the system works, is that we don't see the world from the outside in, that it's all of an inside experience, that we're living in a world of thought, not in a world of our outside circumstances, because everything is neutral. Like when you were in the hospital with this terminal cancer, there were moments when you were laughing. There were moments when you were just calm. There were moments when you're crying. Mm-hmm. So you're not just, Erica with cancer, terminal, the brain's probably saying, this is, playing all kinds of games with you when you were in there, but then it was quiet. So if that's the case, then there's something beyond our thinking.
I really resonate with the message you were sharing earlier, though, right? On the idea of ADHD. And I had read this powerful book even before becoming a parent, let alone a parent to 2 boys. And it's called The Ways of Boys. And years ago it was written. Obviously, my oldest is now 14 and my youngest is 11. But in this book, from my recollection, it talks all about how boys in particular, really with their hormones and testosterone, really need to move. Mm-hmm. Right? And they need to move in class, and they need to be bouncing, and they need to be, fidgeting and doing their thing. Yes. And over time, society and this school education system, right, up until more current recent years, didn't recognize that need. Right. And so then they were almost punished for this need to move. And in turn, I think they started to see it as being wrong. Right? Just this basic human need.
I can completely resonate with that.
Yeah, it's this basic human need to move.
Exactly.
Right? And so then they're seeing themselves as almost being broken when they're not even broken. This is just the ways of boys, right? We just need to promote this movement. And this book, even back then, said all of these diagnoses and quote unquote labels were being put forth, right? And about ADHD and about other things. And I'm not saying all diagnoses are such by any stretch, but a lot of these diagnoses put forth really in boys that just needed a bit more flexibility to move in class or to move in their environment. And you're so right that supporting even outside of school, let alone in school, which I think needs to be a big movement, but supporting outside of school, all the movement we can get for those little guys to run off that energy, right? So that they're not necessarily restless in the wrong environment. So I
love that. So true. And I wish we can go back into, we can get in a DeLorean and go back to 19, we won't go into the date, but 19 something when I was a little kid. And that you tell me that, because the other thing that would be great for parents and even for young adults and even college age kids that are on their own is get curious about when you're not ADHD. Get curious about that experience when you're just in the present moment and you're just hanging out with friends in your dorm room, or hanging out with your friends after school, or even in the classroom, and things just get quiet for no reason. And you're just like, oh, I feel good for no reason. I don't know why. I'm just peaceful.
The power of now.
And our wisdom comes from that. And I didn't see that because I was, most of us are caught up in our head most of the time. We're walking around head cases innocently because we weren't taught this. We weren't
taught being on autopilot. Being stuck on autopilot.
Autopilot,
right?
yeah.
We're just going. We're not even
like Tesla, the autopilot thing.
Life. We're just on autopilot. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's getting curious about when we do get quiet and the wisdom that comes through there. We don't get our first job. We don't get into college. We don't fall in love. We don't write our masterpiece when we're in our heads. The intellect does none of that, but we think it does. And we pay attention to the intellect. And when we're anxious, especially ADHD Sam over here, when I'm trying to figure out a solution to my problem, and I'm so anxious and overwhelmed, that's basically, I'm at the edge of my intellect. Intellect saying, no, you're about to fall off the intellect cliff into the anxiety abyss. It's time to calm it down. And for a lot of people, that's hard when they're at work and they're, You still can go up in front of people and do a presentation at work and be really overwhelmed. You can just say, hey, I'm really anxious. This is my first time, and crack a joke, or just be human. Like, we are all human. We all have this human experience.
You're right. That idea of cracking a joke, it's anything that you can do to break up that stress overload.
Totally.
Right? Where our brain is just firing and firing and firing. And in any state of stress, we can't make our best decision. We can't find the best words. We can't communicate in the best way. We're on overload, right? And so I would imagine that it's anything that can get you from that overload state to a quieter mind, and then to be able to find that truth, and then to be able to communicate as you normally would, without that state of elevation and that state of stress where we can't actually come up with those right words, right? And then we walk away from that conversation that perhaps in that state mode, we didn't find the right words, and then we feel defeated, right? And so it's all of us finding those tools that help us de-escalate from that state of stress when we're all fired up, right? And for me, whether it's cancer, whether for you it's social anxiety, or not social anxiety, but generalized anxiety, or for
you call it a ham sandwich, doesn't matter.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, for any of us. So, a few of my powerful tools, music is one that always helps me shift my mind state. Whether that's, something that I need to increase my energy for before speaking on stage, or whatever that may be, music is also very helpful. Or maybe shift my energy down a bit, right? If I'm coming into a different space, in a different environment, coaching with a client perhaps who's going through really hard days, I want to bring that energy down a bit. Music for me is very helpful in shifting. I call having a personal power statement, right? That really helps me. And it's almost like a mantra or an affirmation that a lot of people would experience. But for me, my personal power statement, which I can go on another show, but really helps me. And it's like I almost just repeat this in any state of stress, or any time where I don't think I'm going to make it through the next day, hour, or minute ahead, right? I repeat this little personal power statement. For me, it's "Go Fighters, Go Mama," from when I was diagnosed. And
what is it? Go Fighters, Go Mama.
Go Fighters, Go Mama. Awesome. And so the story really is, when I was first diagnosed with cancer, my babies were so tiny, right? And I didn't know how to explain it to them, and in words that they would understand. And I knew if I used that big word cancer, that they would not understand, right? But I would crumble if I used that word cancer. And so I didn't want to present it in that way, because I wanted to present, I didn't want to fill them with fear. And so I had thought a little bit about it. Everything happens with leukemia so fast, but I basically presented it to them that, we all have these fighters to fight colds and bugs, but that mommy's fighters just weren't as strong as they needed to be. And that's very congruent in keeping with the nature of leukemia, for which you have no functional white blood cells to fight even the smallest of infections. And I basically said, mommy needs to go to the hospital where they have the know-how and the treatments to get mommy's fighters stronger. And that's how I explained this big word of cancer. And then my oldest, who was just 4 at the time, my youngest had just turned 2, and my oldest was 4. And he's always been one to make any room a brighter and happier space. And all of a sudden, Sam, he just totally shouted out, "Go Fighters, Go Mama," on this really dark, hard day. But this tiny little sentence, so full of so much hope, promise, positivity, and empowerment, really, in the way that he had conveyed it, just brought so much to me. And that instantly became what I now refer to as my personal power statement, right? Something that always quiets the noise for me that's going on all around when we all get stuck on autopilot, right? It quiets that noise, and it always recenters me, pointing me back to my North Star, and always reminds me how lucky
I call that the essential nature. I call that it's our true north, which is who we are. We are not our thinking at all. And in fact, we don't create our thinking. But I love what you said there about, what does it take to drop out of our thinking? Whether you have cancer, or you're in homeless, or just pick your favorite, life obstacle.
Yeah.
There are homeless people that are happy. How do you explain that? If we are our thoughts, then how are families see the richest in life after their building was bombed? And just pick a country that's under siege, or was under siege, and horrible things have happened. And again, nobody's taking away the trauma, but when we see that we create, and what I saw many years later, it took me to my adult years to see, is that the brain is the greatest storyteller. I mean, my uncle, because I can understand your struggle. My uncle had leukemia, passed away a little bit over a month not 3 months ago. It's going actually.
Good, I'm sorry to hear.
He was most gentle person I've ever met, most wise person. He had moments of laughter. He knew he was not going to make it. He had moments of tenderness. And, I didn't see my Uncle Steve as terminal cancer guy. I saw my Uncle Steve as Uncle Steve. Like we don't.
He exemplifies, right, how you can find that sense of enlightenment, that sense of happiness, no matter what we're experiencing. It's always, it comes down to a choice, right? We choose, and it's all what you propel.
Suffering is optional. Right?
We choose what we focus on. We choose those thoughts that we're having, right? And we can choose to shift those thoughts as well. I always say that, what we choose to focus on, we choose to give meaning to. And what we choose to give meaning to, we choose to give life to. So we really need to be very conscious on those thoughts that we propel in our own mind, because we're giving life to those thoughts, right? So your dad or your uncle, sinking into the power of now, right? And being enlightened in that moment, despite all the hardship around him. That's that power of now that we're talking about. That's the power of the presence. And that's where you find that calm in the storm, right? That inner truth. And that's where you find the beauty of hardship.
And you see, there's a lot of wonderful, I don't know if you know Vanita Morjani. She wrote a book, Dying to Live, where she had a near-death experience. Yes. And my girlfriend and I, we met her, and she lives down in the San Diego area in California, and she's lovely. And she talks about that she needed to die to see how life works, which means that she got so quiet and saw like there's nothing to be scared of, like there's no problems. But our mind, and those of you that are hearing this right now, it's constantly creating a story. It's future fantasy thinking. It's creating melodramas. There's no problem. The brain creates drama because it wants to keep you safe, and it thinks thought can keep you safe, but it can. We all know that. But once we see the game the brain's playing, suffering's optional. We can either subscribe to the game and suffer in our thinking, even if things are not going well in your life, ladies and gentlemen. You can still have a feel-good feeling naturally, and can't pay the bills next month. Once we see that our wisdom comes through that, when we're calm and we're in the present moment, that's when all our wisdom comes through what to do next. Yeah, and that's what you saw.
Yes.
Totally, you saw it too.
Pain is completely inevitable. It's part of being human.
That's right.
Par for the course. But that idea of struggle that you raised really comes when we feel that we no longer have power over our circumstance, right? And so let's say in the case of cancer, right? That's hard to take power over cancer, isn't it? This big fire-breathing dragon of cancer. And so we can all feel like we struggle in that sense. But if we choose to focus on that, right, our mind is going to get overwhelmed with that, rather than taking that back, breaking that down, and choosing to focus on what we have the power to control. How am I fueling myself today? My mind, my body. How am I expressing my gratitude? We all have a role in how we heal, in how we play, right? And if we break it down to those smaller bits, I find that really helpful too.
That's so spot on. And it's interesting. And I was thinking about if we took this gift called thought out of the equation, because thought is a gift. We just misuse the equipment a lot innocently because we were taught backwards how the system works innocently. And there's a great book by Jack Pransky called, I think it's called, I Wish They Told Us, which is that we're living in a world of thought. We're not living in a world of our outside circumstances, but we think we are. And so when we see that more, especially kids, young adults, and people, regular adults that have ADHD or, a different type of neurotype, once we see that we do have locus of control by letting go of the controls when our thinking is ramped up, not believing the story it's telling, the catastrophe that, the brain is the greatest used car salesman and the greatest doomsday author. I mean, that's why, Stephen King, he knew how to harness all these thoughts in his head and put it on paper. But just like Stephen King, we have discernment, as you mentioned. We have this kind of like, have you been to like a Vegas hotel? There's like, the huge buffets. You know, we have discernment that we're not going to go to the buffet and pick 20 pieces of chocolate cake, right? And 30 pieces of steak and cheese, because that's probably not that healthy. And, you know, you could get sick. We have one piece of chocolate cake.
You're talking to the girl now who preaches the message of buy the shoes and eat the cake. But on the other hand, I also feel myself very well in the other days. Don't get me wrong, but yes, go ahead.
You got to eat the chocolate cake too. You still got to eat it. You got to do it. But when you see it that way, it's like, you know, as you mentioned, we would give life to thought, but we have a choice whether we want to give life to that thought. And for someone like me with ADHD, when I would get quiet naturally, like we all do, automatically when I'm dropping out of my thinking naturally, because the brain always gets a software update, I call it. And for those of you that are, you know, I don't poo-poo medication. I think medication is wonderful. And I still take medication sometimes for my ADHD because it's like a software update. It quiets down the noise, right? It's not like controlling you, or it's not changing you. It's you are you, 100%. Wonderful and kind and loving. That's your default state. We all are.
Yeah.
Every one of us.
All adjuncts to help quiet that mind. Medication is definitely one.
And if it does that, we can then see like, okay, I'm not the noise then. So if I don't give life to my life, if I don't, you know, thought is nothing without meaning around it. Like if you give life to a thought, then now it has some kind of meaning, and you don't have to. But with, you know, an ADHD mind, it's going so fast. Sometimes we need to slow that down a little bit. And I look at like medication. Another brilliant coach named Garrett Kramer talks about medication as like training wheels, right? Remember, we have a very old brain that's conditioned to act like a 21st century brain, you know, and it doesn't it still thinks, again, it's being chased by a saber-toothed tiger when it's just your bills are due next month, right? It can't differentiate between a saber-toothed tiger and traffic on the freeway. And once we see like the brain is a laptop computer, and it's the great translator between the world of thought and thinking, which is the tool, and the world of the formless, we can see that sometimes, especially in my case with ADHD, my brain acts like Google Translate. You know, ever spoke to someone that has, you know, that speaks German, you don't speak German, and you're trying to speak with them to be cool. Like I used to do this, like it would come out all kind of garbled. It's like, you don't speak German. You must be using Google Translate. Well, that's what the brain does sometimes. It glitches, you know.
I find it so helpful to talk to yourself almost like a third person, right? You know, to get that.
Yeah.
Well, everything we're talking about today really comes down to this big idea of awareness, right? Being aware of our thoughts, being mindful, and how to calm those thoughts. But that analogy that you gave of the saber-toothed tiger, I've used myself with my own son, who's a type 1 diabetic. And I have a type 1 diabetic who at first had a huge anxiety with needles, a needle phobia. And those two things don't go together because this poor child needs to give himself 10 needles a day, you know? So we really needed to work on getting over those anxieties and that needle phobia very quickly. And one thing that was very helpful was the self-talk that he does even with himself. It's beautiful to witness, where he's like, okay, wait, my brain is seeing this as a saber-toothed tiger, right? Because that's how his brain is interpreting this with this level of fear that he's experiencing. But then he almost like talks to himself and he's like, okay, but wait, this isn't a saber-toothed tiger, right? This is like really minutia here. And then he almost just talks himself through it. It's really beautiful to witness.
Smart kid.
Yeah.
Smart kid. And it's right. Well, smart. Yeah. It's amazing that I think kids have, you know, when kids are little, as you know, having kids, you know, I have a niece and nephew, and, you know, my nephew's 5. He'll have a temper tantrum. I mean, like it's fire and brimstone, like the world's coming to an end. And 5 minutes later, like it never happened.
Oh yeah, totally.
Adults do the same thing.
Yeah.
But yet we have this hard drive that's been, you know,
conditioned,
conditioned, but saving all this data from decades of being on this planet. And then the brain innocently goes to an old memory. Remember when you did this?
I think conditioned from societal pressures that we were talking about before. Start right away in school. No, do not move. Do not move. Do not move. You're not allowed to move. Sit still.
Stand up straight.
Just focus, right? Yeah. And for that person to focus, they might need to focus best by walking around a room, right? But these conditions that have been imposed on us by those societal pressures have made to think that we're doing this wrong and ourselves. And then we impose self-judgment, and then that whole cascade of mental health unfolds, right? So you have been so impactful today, and I'm so
Thank you,
thankful
Erica.
for you
It's
to
an
join
honor
us
to be on this
on this
program.
show, Sam. Are there
Thank
some
you.
closing words that you would like to leave our audience with to inspire and empower them on their own journeys?
Yes, and this is a quote that coaches, we all like plagiarize each other's quotes, and this one's always stayed with me. It's one of my favorite coaches. He wrote a book called The Inside Out Revolution, Michael Neal, who's a principles coach, wonderful, wonderful human being and a brilliant coach. He calls human beings, we are diamonds covered in doo-doo, lacquered in lipstick. So we are the diamond, right? And everything else is the conditioning and the mask,
The mud.
right? The mud
that covers it. Yeah.
And that's thought thinking. And especially for my ADHD brothers and sisters out there, get curious. Get curious about when your thinking goes sideways and you're sped up and you're overwhelmed. Get curious more about when you're quiet for no reason, when you're not ADHD, when you're just focused, not hyper focused like a lot of us get with ADHD, but just quiet. Look for your central nature. Look for your feel-good feeling, and that's all it is. But our brain will overcomplicate it. Look for a feel-good feeling, and I guarantee you,
all about finding that calm in the chaos.
That's right.
And looking for that feel-good feeling, like you say,
pointing back to who we are, which is well-being and calm. Yeah.
Okay, risers and thrivers, you've heard some great tools today. We'd love your feedback on the show. As always, you can DM, send emails, messages, whatever your preference, but I would love your feedback on today's show, as would Sam. Thank you for joining us, Sam. And thank you, risers and thrivers. We hope it's a great day. Rise today, my friends. All the best.
It's gonna be a good day.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Take this inspiration forward. Learn more at risetoday.com/podcast. And please do help us in our mission to spread hope, inspiration, and positivity by encouraging those in your circle to join us and to tune in for our next show of inspiration coming soon. Please contact us if you have a powerful story to share with us to inspire the world. Until next time, get out there and rise today.